Welcome to Democracy Works. I'm Jenna Spinelli. We are back with the first episode of our fall 2025 season, and we are looking at threats to higher education coming from the Trump administration.
I think our future is in doubt.
More importantly, what faculty and staff at universities can do to push back against those threats and to share the value that higher education has in our society, in our country, and in our democracy.
At the end of the day, higher ed is the pillar of democracy, and these attacks are an attack not only on higher ed, but democracy itself.
Our guests are Kathy Roberts-Forde and Mark Pachucki from a brand new organization called Stand Together for Higher Ed, which is a nonpartisan movement of university faculty, staff, and people who care about universities that are, just as the name suggests, standing together to defend higher education. There's a lot to unpack in this episode. I hope you enjoy. Chris, why don't you, if you don't mind, just bring us up to speed a little bit on some of the threats and the attacks that have gone on over the past couple of months.
Oh, is that on? Okay, well, I mean, we have to, the three of us have to be aware of our own biases here, but and does cut pretty close to the bone, but it's still just a fact that the current administration has made initiatives and taken demands associated with the actions of universities that's just simply unprecedented, right? You have big names like Columbia and Harvard that are big targets, and everybody has heard of those colleges, and they were given ultimatums, right? You do this, or we are going to cut your funding. And so the federal government has a lot of levers to pull. They have a lot of resources that they can take away, and by doing so, they can impact higher education dramatically. And it's fair to ask whether or not the people who are going to be hurt by funding cuts associated with grants like the National Institutes for Health or the National Science Foundation are going to impact any of the problems they identify. But it's still huge dollars that the faculty had budgeted, that the universities have budgeted and depend on, are expecting, right? There's also issues associated with. Now, let me just say one more thing about the budget cuts. It's pretty well documented now that the Trump administration went through the proposals for these grants and did word searches for things like, DEI words, woke words like, feminist, trans, empower. I mean, words that just, to their mind, ruled these things out, and they were just out and out canceled. The other thing that is big is the impact on foreign students. Foreign students are a huge part of most universities. They pay full freight, so there's a lot of money that comes in from these students. Matter of fact, one of my colleagues said that foreign students make Penn State an exporter, because we're getting money for money's coming in for services that we're providing.
I think it's important for us to think about what the science does and what the purpose of it is. So there is this, a lot of people, I mean, even people that I really respect, writing op-eds that are saying, well, university has become too dependent on government funding. But dependence, I think, has the connotation that there is a one-way benefit, and that scientists are doing science to the benefit of universities. And that's just not true.
It's not true.
Folks are doing works on vaccines, on diseases, on the quality of our democracy in comparison over time, so that we can learn lessons and hopefully not repeat them. Um, that you know that kind of work is, a lot of it is high failure, high risk, and there are not industries and for-profit businesses that are going to pay scientists to fail over and over again, even though the intellectual it is actually required to have a lot of failures in order to understand how the world works. But that is not profitable. And so this kind of idea that, like, well, that research can be pushed to industry, industries aren't going to do that, right? In fact, we know that a lot of industries, a lot of the best things that we see and have in healthcare and technology and media, so on and so forth, started in labs at colleges and universities. So, yes, colleges and universities had budgets that said we were going to get a grant from this, the NIH, the NEH, USAID, NSF, so on and so forth, this kind of alphabet soup. But to what end? And that end was to produce knowledge, to produce technology, to produce medicines, to have discoveries in all sorts of domains of our lives that everybody benefits from. So I just want to make sure that we put the conversation around the attack on universities and higher education in the scope of democracy. And, right? So that in terms of the health of societies, and not just, people who are navel gazing and we're gouging students with tuition, um, there is a larger benefit from the research to the education component to putting knowledge in service of society, and not just kind of using money to get, to fill coffers. I think that if we look at history and we look at how conservatives um, have thought about higher education, starting from integration of higher ed institutions as being something that's going to undo us, right? I mean, the Red Scare, that also came into, well, what are university professors doing? Um, you know, we see over the course of time where institutions of higher education in the United States, and of course in many other places, are places where people are supposed to think for themselves and are supposed to push back, are supposed to ask questions, um, and are supposed to challenge our kind of dominant narratives of whatever. And just like as an example, maybe a parallel, um, I cannot find this source, but one of the kind of legal strategists around the anti-abortion movement said that we took the same strategy as Brown versus Board of Education, which was to make little tweaks at the state level and start talking about things. And look, now you have to wait a month. Now you have to ask your parents. And then people are like, okay, well, that's just a little tweak. Okay, well, that's just a little tweak. Okay, well, that's just a little tweak. And now we can wipe it away. And so I think that we just have to be careful about how we talk about this moment. There's this moment, and then there's this moment in the big scheme of things. And we do see patterns.
Yeah, so we've done several episodes on the history of higher education and some of the bigger issues that you are getting to, Candace. But yes, both of you are correct that Stand Together is really addressing what is happening right now. So let's hear it from them. Let's go to the interview with Kathy and Mark. Kathy Roberts Forde and Mark Pachucki, welcome to Democracy Works. Thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Me too.
So the two of you are here today in your capacity as part of the organization Stand Together for Higher Ed, which we will talk all about here in just a moment. But Kathy, I want to start with you. And here we are at the end of summer, ready to start a new academic year. And I wonder if you could just start by bringing us a little up to speed on what's happened over these past couple of months. You talked back in June about some of the potential threats coming to reductions in Pell Grant eligibility, student loans, research funding, accreditation, among many, many other things. So what has transpired, and how are you feeling now here as we record this in August compared to, where you were back in June?
So we were worried about these matters back in June. And in fact, we have seen all of these issues grow ever more urgent across the summer. And in fact, other types of new concerns emerge. And so, yes, there was just an article out today, I think it was in the Chronicle, about the disarray that is being reported from colleges, from college staff about concerns about Pell Grants and financial aid coming from the federal government. So we are not at all, things seem very unsettled in that space. We know that there are new accrediting agencies that are being created to shift the accreditation landscape in ways that are of concern to many of us. And we fear are going to be ways in which state governments and legislators and policymakers are going to be able to intrude into institutional autonomy and faculty governance. We have also seen growing attacks on particular universities. We've had the forced resignation of the University of Virginia president. We have had intrusion into the affairs of George Mason, into faculty governance affairs there. We have had at the state level in Texas, at the Texas state system, we have had the complete dissolution of faculty senates. We have also had what Gavin Newsom, governor of California, has called what amounts to a $1 billion extortion of the UC system by the federal government. And so, as we are all beginning to prepare for the academic year, there's a great deal that faculty and staff across this country, alums, students, everyone in the public should be thinking about and caring about when it comes to not only research funding, but all kinds of other matters that should concern us all in the higher ed sector. I mean, at the end of the day, higher ed is a pillar of democracy, and these attacks are an attack not only on higher ed, but democracy itself.
And amid all of these things, it seems like there's just a barrage coming at us from every direction. I know even what you just said there is not the complete list of everything that's going on within higher ed. It can feel, overwhelming. And, where do we start? How do we begin to push back against this? And I think that is one of the great things about the Stand Together organization. And Mark, I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about how it came to be.
Sure. I can give a little bit of background. I will say, I really appreciated Kathy's answer and starting off with attacks on Pell Grants. I'm a student from when I was in college. I was a Pell Grant recipient, and I'm only here today because that opportunity was opened to me. So the variety of attacks that we've seen over the last 6 months have devastated a lot of university systems and thrown a lot of really, really worried students into disarray. And we as faculty and as leaders at our institutions said we need to do something to come together. And so at our institution at UMass, we are here as private citizens, and that's the grounds on which we're speaking to you today. But our institution took note of what Rutgers University was doing in terms of passing their faculty senate passed mutual academic defense compact. And several of us here said, that's fantastic. We do need to stand together with one another across institutional lines, but it can't stop there. It can't just be one university. It can't just be a cluster of the Big Ten. I admire what they did, and I think we have a lot of praise for what they did, but we said we need to do more than that. Every single institution in this country should find a way to be coming together in some fashion. And there's a lot of different ways that universities and colleges can collaborate with one another. But Stand Together for Higher Education was just, an expression and an outgrowth of those efforts in the spring.
Yeah. So you mentioned the phrase mutual academic defense compact, which was a new term to me when I first heard about your organization. I'm sure it will be new to some of our listeners as well. Can you just tell us what that is?
Sure, I'll be very brief with this, and maybe Kathy can jump in as well. But the idea is that every single institution has its own set of resources, unique talents, and expertise that body of human capital, academic workers specialize in. And the idea is that if at our institution we have something unique we can share with others, we are willing to do so. And we see this every day in our research lives and in our teaching lives. We have students coming into our classrooms from all over the country. We have a lot of us collaborating with other scientists at other universities. So the idea of collaborating is nothing new, but this takes on a new imperative, I think, for lack of a better term, when the future of higher education is being threatened. I don't know, Kathy, I don't know if you can add on to that.
I think that's excellent. I think the only thing I'll add is that this idea for a mutual academic defense compact originated at Rutgers in their faculty senate, and then it spread to faculty senates all over the country. There are a great many beyond the Big Ten that have passed these mutual academic defense compact resolutions. And the idea is they took from this NATO, from NATO, an attack on one is an attack on all. And the idea is let's pool resources, talents, collective action capacities of our immensely rich with resources, but also under-resourced at the same time, institutions across this country. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of higher ed, 2-year and 4-year and R1, in research intensive institutions across this country of all different kinds. And they reach into every single city, town, hamlet, village of this country, and every single state in this country. And all of this higher ed sector that we have, everyone is suffering in this moment. And so the question is, and in different ways, and so the question is, how can we bring faculty and staff at these institutions together to build the capacity for collective action, to share in ideas for how we defend higher ed together? I will say that the mutual academic defense compacts that stand together for higher ed, we support them. But we are focused right now on building stand together teams on as many campuses as we can. The reason is the MATIC resolutions, they cannot be passed in a lot of red and purple institutions in a lot of red and purple states. There is simply not the political terrain on which they can move. So many of these states have passed legislation and already constrained faculty governance and intruded on institutional autonomy in such profound ways that faculty and staff in these institutions cannot pass MATICs. It's just simply not possible. And in fact, even those that have are finding it very difficult to get a high-level administrative buy-in at the institutional level. And so we think it's incredibly important for stand together teams to be built so that there can be just even small groups that kind of operate very quietly or really loudly to begin to build faculty and staff power together.
Mm-hmm. So I realize that some of these teams may still be in the early stages of development, but in an ideal world, who's on the team, what I know, every school might be different in terms of what the team does or what it works on, but what are some of the kinds of things that you envision one of these teams undertaking?
Sure. I think from the faculty and staff we've been talking to all summer at different institutions around the country, we've been hearing from them their concerns about what's been going on their campuses, why they're so worried, and why they signed up as members. What we said to them is that there's a variety of things that one can do, depending upon the situation on your campus. One would be to organize faculty and staff who stand together's values of promoting academic freedom, free from political or financial interference, and to encourage public discussion on their own campuses. Teams could host events related to higher education and academic freedom, such as a teach-in. We have one that's going to be coming up this fall that we're going to be rolling out with the collaboration of the AAUP at universities and colleges around the country. So even getting together to share experiences like that can help faculty and staff feel like they're not alone. We can be encouraging people to write op-eds or policy statements, or to write their legislators and community partners. Faculty and staff could be gathering stories about impact, but also about all of the good that higher education does for our country. We know that higher education helps fuel our economy, and we know that when the national science infrastructure is damaged in the way that it is, discovery stalls, and our nation's reputation and its ability to affect change in the world diminishes in some ways. So that damage to our economy is something that we're really trying to head off. We could be promoting and modeling the importance of reaching across whatever aisles separate us. I'm a sociologist. I study how people come together and what breaks them apart. And in how we study relationships, we know that reaching out to someone who is not like you in some capacity is often a difficult thing to do, but there's so much reward in building a diverse social network and a thickly intertwined network of people that can collectively enact some end goal. But I think at the end, it's about students. It's about the next generation of learners, and really listening to them and their thoughts and their concerns about higher education. So I think regardless of what state one is in, whether one's at a 2-year school or at a 4-year school, private or public, there's a huge variety that local teams can be doing.
Yeah, and Mark, you said something there that I want to pick up on two parts of, which was that the ability and the power that faculty and staff have to speak out versus the administration of a college or university. And let's start with the faculty and staff piece of that, because a tenured faculty member, as I understand it, is different in this scenario or in this capacity than a faculty member who does not have tenure, than someone who is a staff member and not faculty at all. So I wonder if you could just walk through those distinctions and the extent to which it impacts one's ability to speak out on behalf of the institution.
I'll step in here simply because I've thought about this a great deal. I'm sure Mark has too. But when Jen Lundquist and I co-founded and launched Stand Together for Higher Ed in early June, we did so out of our experience with having led a letter campaign that launched in late March, when Columbia was under its first encounter with the federal administration. And at that time, we were asking in that letter, and we had a number of people from across the country and colleagues here at UMass Amherst collaborating together to write this letter. And we were writing directly to leaders of the 60 institutions that had been named in the OCR letter from the Department of Education as targets for investigation and perhaps punitive action for anti-Semitism. Now, in that letter that we wound up getting more than 5,000 signatures from faculty, mostly tenured faculty at institutions all over the country, a few from outside the country too, that we learned some things. When we put that letter together, we were so fearful about anyone signing that letter who was not tenured, that our call was particularly, we didn't exclude non-tenured, it was only the faculty. We did not exclude non-tenured faculty, but we made a point to say, please consider your risk very closely when you are considering signing this letter. Since then, we maintain these concerns, but we heard from so many staff who wanted to be part of whatever came next after that letter. And so when we were talking through creating Stand Together for Higher Ed with each other and our colleagues like Mark, we said, you've got to open this to staff. Staff on college campuses around this country they serve and build the mission of the institution. And so many are so important to our students' lives and their success and their livelihood and to our own happiness and our own work, that we wanted to open things up. But we are we ask everyone who signs up for Stand Together for Higher Ed to think about their risk. We instruct members who are creating Stand Together teams on their campuses to think very carefully about who could be the lead and out there as the public face and voice of the Stand Together team on their campus, and make sure that that person is either has some degree of protection based on their position, or, fully understands the risk. Mark, what else would you say?
I would just say it's, I think, incumbent upon those of us who do have those job protections to be allies and to put ourselves forward in order to stand up. I think, Jenna, the initial question that you asked of, what are some of these distinctions and gradations, for some of your listenership who might not be familiar, there's a probationary period for faculty that is usually 5, 6, 7 years, something like that.
So we have the, faculty and staff, but then there's the administration. So how are you all and the folks you're working with thinking about that? Like, how is there pressure to be applied to administrators and administrations that might have this feeling? And if so, what might some of those pressure points be?
I think Mark points to this, and your question too, Jenna. It's like the prisoner's dilemma for leaders of higher ed institutions at the moment. That is, it's really hard to act collectively and for the collective good when, the some of these attacks work on a divide and conquer kind of strategy, which is very effective. And so, institutions are afraid of being the next target, and for very good reason, because we have seen what the punitive actions do, and how powerful state action at the federal and state level has been. And so, what I would say is that, certainly, I think that a lot of faculty and staff don't see what their administrations are doing. It's really hard. The messaging has been constrained as well in terms of institutional administrations kind of trumpeting out to the world everything that they're doing to serve their missions and their faculty and their students and their staff. But they, certainly at UMass Amherst and in the UMass system, we know that they are doing an incredible amount and working incredibly hard in concert with the Office of General Counsel, the president of the UMass system, the governor, the attorney general. So you see right now in the state of California, you see the entire UC system and the state government collectively working together. And so there's just so much that is happening. What I think when we think of what Stand Together for Higher Ed can do, and this has been something we've thought about from the very beginning, is we, faculty and staff, working collectively across the country in teams of our own institution, but also with each other, we can help clear the way. We can do things that institutions can't do themselves. We can ask each other to be involved in contacting legislators. We can ask each other to engage in this, what we're calling the Reclaim the Narrative campaign, which we're launching this fall, as Mark mentioned, with the AAUP. This is going to be a faculty and staff teach-in with the goal of everyone engaging in public messaging about why the value of higher ed, how higher ed is indeed a public good. It's for the common good, and it is well worth our defending. We know from recent public opinion polls, including the UMass poll, which our colleagues have done, that there's a great deal of support for higher ed and a great deal of anxiety out there in the public about what's happening with these attacks on institutions and these punitive measures. And so, I think that public messaging is really important. So is this, outreach to legislators, and there's more we can do collectively.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned outreach to legislators. That's actually where I wanted to go next. And so I know that some of that has been happening, at least here at Penn State. Our government relations team has been meeting with both our state legislature and our federal representatives in Washington. So what are the levers that can be pulled there, or those points of commonality maybe, or how can this work be presented in a way that might be appealing and effective to legislators given the incentives and the structures that they have to operate within?
What we understand from discussions we've had on our national leadership team and others is that that kind of what you just described is happening at institutions and all over this country with state legislatures and with their federal delegations. And so that work is well underway because in every state there are institutions that are trying to keep the federal research dollars flowing, that are trying to protect Pell Grants, that are trying to protect financial aid, and trying to, maintain, this piece of the higher ed, student access and research funding. There are other areas where we think, first of all, that needs to be encouraged. Keep it up, and don't let up on those efforts to persuade and to message, and to affect policy change. But also, our legislators at state and federal levels also need to really understand how higher ed works, why institutional autonomy matters, why tenure protections matter, why faculty governance matters. That these are not just that these actually are pillars of of democracy and pillars of encouraging inquiry and free thought and discovery. And it keeps that space of discovery, uh, debate, critical thinking wide open and free from all kinds of possible political repression that we've seen over and over and over again in this country's history. And those things matter. And they're hard to describe. They're hard to make people understand how they work and why they matter. But we need to be doing that too.
Kathy, could I build on that? Just,
Please.
I'm thinking about the 1940 AAUP statement about academic freedom. This is kind of the canonical text that a lot of us go back to. But very clearly there, and this resonates with what you're saying here, that institutions of higher education are conducted for the common good and not to further the interest of either the individual teacher or the institution as a whole. The common good depends upon the free search for truth and its free exposition, end quote. So this has been very clearly thought about and talked about for decades and decades. But as we talk to legislators and advocate outside of the university walls, I think making the case that college is that engine, and our country needs both college graduates as well as skilled tradespeople. It is not that college is the only path out there, but it can help local economies. It can help prepare our young people for real world jobs in very tangible ways to solve problems and adapt quickly, work in teams, all of the skills that we know that employers in a given state are going to prize. So there is the message about what academic freedom is and why it matters for the common good. And at the end of the day, I think also what is very persuasive is a state's economy and the bottom line in allowing a state to thrive. And I think both messages matter quite a lot.
Hear, hear.
Yes, absolutely. So, a good number of our listeners are part of higher ed in some way, either faculty, staff, or something along those lines. But for those who are not, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the vast majority of our listeners are, at a minimum, alumni of an institution or perhaps more than one institution. So what about for folks who don't directly work in higher ed but still want to be supportive of this work? What are some things that they can do?
So there are a number of institutions where alumni have started their own groups to support their institution. I'm thinking in particular of Crimson Courage at Harvard, which is an extraordinary organization that has done all kinds of manner of an amicus brief. They've had a protest at a federal court decision where a case involving Harvard was being heard. They have mobilized alum to write letters to the president of Harvard and the corporation at Harvard to try to shape Harvard's response in a way that is protective of all these things that we're talking about now that makes higher ed what it is. So I think that alumni, at the moment, Stand Together for Higher Ed is faculty and staff focus. We have to start there. That doesn't mean we won't build out eventually, but for now, what alumni can do is they have an extraordinary power themselves. There are millions and millions of alum in this country from second, 2, and 4, and graduate school institutions who have the power to do something as alum and citizens and people who care deeply about keeping higher ed going for their own children and community members and for democracy itself.
So as we sort of start to wind things down here, we are again at the beginning of a new school year. For someone who listens to this and says, "Yes, I love everything you all are saying. I want to get the ball rolling for this at my particular institution." What are the steps they should take?
If there's a small group of faculty and staff on a campus that are already in conversation with each other, call yourself a Stand Together for Higher Ed team. There is also a place on our website where you can sign up as a team. We have a toolkit on the website that people can use to think through how they can create a team quickly. A team can be 3 to 4 to 15 to 20 to 25 to many people. It can be situated as a standalone. It can be housed within an AAUP chapter if your campus happens to have one, or in some kind of governance body. It could be part of a union group. I mean, it can be held anywhere that makes sense in a local context, because every institution has a highly specific local context. You can be out. The team can be really public and be active and doing all kinds of things. It can be a very quiet group of people who are looking for shelter with one another and just beginning to think together. Mark, what else would you say?
I'm still hung up on the last question that Jenna asked us,
Oh.
and I think I'm going to try to connect it to what you're talking about, Kathy, because when I talk to people about Stand Together for Higher Ed that are not in academia, and they say, "What can we do?" I always say, you can be supporting the folks in your life who are pursuing science. If there is a young person in your life who gets the spark in their science class in 4th grade to do a science project, you can help them out with that as a parent, or if you have a niece or a nephew. And there's a moment that we're in right now where all of us who are scientists have trained for years and years and years to do the work that we are doing. There's kind of an implicit bargain in the jobs that we do that, you're in school for this long and you've chosen this as your career. You deserve to be able to have the freedom to ask the kinds of questions that you want to follow the data where it leads. And kids who are inspired in grade school or college to become scientists deserve that same chance. And so I just think about, if you are not in academia yourself, chances are, a young person who is getting interested. And there's a lot you can do to encourage that spark in them. And we certainly want higher education to be around for the next generation and for generations to come. We think, we are in an existential crisis right now. And if faculty do not come together, if we cannot figure out how to stand together and to realize this idea that we're stronger together, I think our future is in doubt. And so for whatever career path you are in, whatever vocation you have chosen, you can think about applying that to your own life and having your own freedom and your own dignity curtailed. And I think that, that's a very human kind of connection. And
Yeah.
I think it matters to us all.
We will link to the website in the show notes so folks can go and check it up and sign up and learn more. And Kathy and Mark, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna.
All right. Well, that was really interesting and provocative. I mean, I just was frustrated with what I took to be when they were talking about what people should do, what this organization is striving to do, and what they're recommending that people in higher education do. I heard a lot of vague words, that, we're in disarray. We need to communicate, come together, clear the way, claim the narrative. And I'm just thinking, how would you know if you accomplish that? There's nothing about those words that give you a sense of concreteness, of specificity, of objectives even. And I find that very frustrating. And given the kind of where we are with regards to, the crisis in which we find ourselves, I don't know that, clearing the way, claiming the narrative is what we should be focusing on as our goals.
I hear you. I mean, you're just kind of like what I hear you saying is you are bringing a knife to a gunfight with
Exactly. Yeah.
with these fancy words about engagement and communication. Um, but what I hear them saying is that we have to defend institutions. That we have the reason why students across the world flock to the United States is because for many reasons, but in part, what makes our university so good and higher education so good is because we have academic freedom and we've had institutional autonomy, right? And so somebody has to defend those things. History shows, other countries shows that you can have a university of blank that does not actually do the work of walking toward truth, but instead is a arm of the government, right? Which is not a way to walk toward truth. What I hear them say is we have to take responsibility, um, and we have to show up. People have to show up and they have to witness what other people are saying so that they don't feel gaslit. What I hear them saying is that we have to remember professional ethics, that the way that we got here was to build over time a um, a way of being so that we can do the hard work that is necessary for finding out what causes diabetes or autism or obesity or racism or anti-Semitism or sexism or whatever. That we have to believe in truth. And we are in a situation where like people are, I mean, go back to 2016. Kellyanne Conway shows up talking about alternative facts. That is not a way to be. And so, like, we are in the situation where people are living totally different lives in their media landscapes. And somebody has to be there to say, you can believe what you want to believe, but facts are facts and we can work toward the truth. So, yeah, like communicate and come together. But what I also hear is defend solidarity, um, and stand up for the things that made us the
The
place
envy
that
of the
people want to
world,
come
right?
all over the world.
Yeah.
So,
And that's why foreign students come here. Even students from authoritarian countries come here because they know the value of critical thinking and independent thinking and being self-critical, right? And that's the kind of thing that you are taught in an American university you're far more likely to be taught that there than anywhere else. I I I I grant that. I feel like the arguments, need to be a little bit more well, no, need to be significantly more, hard-edged than they are.
I'd be curious to know, Chris, what you think would be good strategies in this moment that like what is the gun in the like, fire meets fire. Like what does that what do you think that looks like?
Think that a lot all right, here's what I would do. I think the, the response of the Georgetown Law School dean was very powerful and appropriate. And, he just said, "I'm not one bit of this." They said, "Unless you" I mean, this was in March, so it was a while ago. But they said, "Unless you can, prove that you are no longer having DEI policies. We will no longer hire your graduates, the Georgetown Law School graduates, in any executive agency. And he just said, no, we're not going to do that. We're just not going to change our behavior because of you. And I think that is a stiff response. And you can argue all over the place that Georgetown law is a unique beast, and that, if you're in LSU or, University of Tennessee in Knoxville, that you have different problems. I get that. And I'm perfectly willing um, to acknowledge that, not every strategy is going to work everywhere. But if it were me, I would say, first of all, the strategy of administrations to say, we're going to keep our heads down and hope that he doesn't come after us, is not a good strategy. And um, and you know, there is a much better, I mean, maybe it won't even work, but at least you have the satisfaction of doing the right thing, which is to say, no, we're not doing this. This is wrong. And you have no right to be stepping in where you have no expertise. We're going to do what we want. And we're going to continue to provide a level of sophisticated education that is going to make a difference in the world. And if you don't like it, pound sand. I would like that. I would like to see more universities taking that kind of response.
Yeah, I'm going to put my administrator hat on, which I'm just going to borrow because I'm not in administration anymore.
Well, you have a
And
lot more experience with it than I do. So
and so I think that what somebody in administration would say is, my job is to ensure that this institution that has been alive for 150 or 200 years continues to be alive. Now, of course, like the callback, the feedback there is, yeah, under what circumstances,
Yeah.
right? Like, what is it that you're doing inside of there? So just to say that, I think that some people would say that the things that we're doing is so that we can continue to do the work as best as we can in the situation that we can. I think you're right, Chris, that, back to the example that you get about like trying different things. I think that we see that doing nothing, keeping one's head down is not a good strategy. That fully acquiescing is also not a good strategy. That implementing policies to undermine your own institution before anyone asks you to do that is also not a good thing to do. I think, though, that what's happening with with the Stand Together group is, let's try to figure out what does work. Maybe, what can we do? What is possible? How can we orient ourselves toward answering a problem within very constrained boundaries? So I hear what you're saying is like, okay, well, let's be like really like, let's talk about this like with our whole chest. And let's be really clear about why we're doing it this way. And just to bring it back to our earlier conversation, was that the moment that we're in is unprecedented in the United States. And so knowing what exactly to do is hard to know, but we're learning day by day what not to do. And I think testing the waters, experimenting, I mean, that is our own language as, scientists and scholars, is to like try it, see if it works, assess, pivot, try something new.
That's I mean, it's always such a pleasure arguing with Candace. I like it more when we disagree because because I always end up learning more as a result. Um, so I think what this conversation speaks to is just how complicated, difficult, um, how much is at stake in this conversation. And I mean, it is not by any means clear what's the right strategy, and it requires conversations like this. And I will say that Stand Together you know, is part of that conversation and deserves credit for that. So I more to come, right? This isn't going away,
Indeed.
and it is worth our time to reflect on it. And anyway, so yeah, good. We're up to a good start this year. For the McCourtney Institute for Democracy, I'm Chris Beam.
And I'm Candace Watts Smith. Thank you for listening.